growing up in a household where politics and leadership was pretty much dinner table conversation. How did that help you become the leader that you have today?
BJP was born in 1980. I was born in 1980. And we were very few. My father, I've seen him only hardworking since childhood. There are a lot of experiences I had with him. And he just said, whatever you do, give your 100% and perform.
You were so young when he unfortunately passed away. What impact did that have on you?
I've been working for a lot of NGOs for education since I was a young kid. I was always keeping myself busy with some purpose in life. I think a lot of people saw something in me. In that, they thought I should take a plunge in politics.
The 2014 election, how did you feel in that moment, and what were some of the biggest learnings for you from that campaign?
The seat which nobody wanted to contest because it was called as a Congress Gad. I had that again conviction to fight. Some concerned elders in the party said, Beta, it's very difficult. Your career has just started. Why do you want to start with defeat?
Investors are pretty much making capital allocation decisions. Politicians are making allocations of trust and resources. Do you think there is some similarity there?
Yes and no. There are few similarities, but when a business house or business leaders put in their capital, they really work towards that gain in a certain way. We have a spectrum of working a lot of things. It's not only trust. Sometimes people do trust us, and in some elections we don't see that kind of victory which we should.
Now India will be 100 plus years old, not as a country but as a democracy, like you said, in 2047. What's your hope to see India as in 2047? Hello and welcome everyone to the India Opportunity Show. I'm your host Shrishti. Today I'm thrilled to welcome a very special guest, Miss Poonam Mahajan, one of the most dynamic young leaders in Indian politics. She's a two-term member of Parliament from Mumbai, also the first woman to lead BJP's youth wing nationally. She's someone who's consistently spoken about the power of Indian youth, women empowerment and supporting local entrepreneurs. Poonam ji represents the intersection of legacy and modern leadership. As the daughter of late Pramod Mahajan ji, one of India's most influential political strategists, she grew up around the levers of power. But her own journey has been of carving an independent voice and building credibility in the parliament. At a time where India aspires to become a $30 trillion economy by 2047, Poonam ji's perspective really matters because policy and politics are the scaffolding on which entrepreneurs and investors eventually build. In this conversation, we'll explore three acts. The first one about legacy, leadership, and resilience. We'll also talk about policy and capital. What do some of the reforms really mean for Indian entrepreneurs and investors? And lastly, her vision for India in 2047, led by youth, women, and institutional capital. This is not just a political conversation. It's about how leadership at the national level shapes opportunities for businesses, innovation, and wealth creation. Please welcome Poonam Mahajan ji. Hope you enjoy watching. Hello Poonam ji, welcome to the India Opportunity Show. Such a privilege to have you with me today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Shrishti.
As we were just talking, you were the first politician I've hosted on the show.
Yeah,
So it's truly an honor.
but it's a pressure on me. I'm your first, and the impression I have to make should be lasting.
Yes,
I'll
of
try my
course.
best.
You know, your work has already touched so many lives. You've done so much for Indian youth, for women, for entrepreneurs, and I can go on and on. But, I wanted to start the conversation taking you down the memory lane to maybe perhaps a difficult time in your life and bring up, Mr. Pramod Mahajan ji. Because, your journey has been inspired by his journey is in so many different ways. I wanted to ask you, growing up in a household where politics and leadership was pretty much dinner table conversation, how did that impact you? And how did that help you become the that you have today?
Oh. So my father was working as a RSS Karyakarta since he was maybe 14 years old. And he started working since then, and nation building was always an idea, which he worked towards it, then joined politics. Before that, he was a teacher, then a journalist. So he's also taken time, worked hard towards it. So those stories have always been more on dinner table conversation than political quips or what is happening politically, who's behaving what. I think that actually shaped me as a person. Because there was no politics on the dinner table. It was more about what are you doing today? Anything interesting have you done? So it's all about your contribution, what you're doing as a person. And I think my father was, let me use the real world, a very chill person, if and very regimental and chill. He was very adaptable. And in his conversation, what I learned that you have to be consistent and not only in politics, in life. And once that hard work you put in, everything comes out. Of course, there are many dinner table stories
Yes.
or born in BJP. BJP was born in 1980. I was born in 1980. So I think we are growing together as a party and family. And we were very few back then. Now the party is the world's largest party, but we were very few back then. So every experience is pretty interesting when I look back in the memory lane. But my father, I've seen him only hardworking, working towards it, never told us that you have to be in politics or not in politics. But we should understand policies. Since childhood, there are a lot of experiences I had with him. And he just said, whatever you do, give your 100% and perform. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So maybe that I learned from him, the conviction more than politics. Politics is all experience and your rise and fall and your mistakes, your correcting your mistakes. I think that only comes with experience, not with learning.
Yes, that's so true because you were so young when he unfortunately passed away. And what impact did that have on you as a leader? Was coming into politics something that you had always seen for yourself? Because I read that you were a pilot before, so very different day jobs, right?
I didn't take the job because I got married very early, and I've been working for a lot of NGOs for education since I was a young kid, animal welfare, environment. So I was always keeping myself busy with some purpose in life. I don't know, I can't answer this yes or no. How did I decide? When did I decide? The time was so hazy for me. And maybe when my father passed away, we faced the cases. There were a lot of things happening back to back that year in 2006. It's been 20 years now. I think a lot of people saw something in me. I don't know what that was. Um, they thought I should take a plunge in politics. I don't know when I look back, was it right or wrong? Only time will tell. But maybe I did that. But with that also, again, I'm telling you, politics also, I take it as I always decided purpose is very important to you. What happened to my father, it was very difficult to face it. Post him, you don't understand who are your friends, who's doing what behind you. With all those experiences, I have understood only one thing which I learned from my father. You must have a purpose. And once you take something in your life, I take it as my purpose and then we can put in conviction. So I am in politics. When I look back, was it a right or wrong decision? But I'm trying my best to make that course correction to do much, much better. I'm thinking this was my purpose or maybe this was my calling.
Hmm. Because this is such an important distinction, right? Like some people might see you that, because you were a politician's daughter, this was pretty much your inheritance, or this is what was planned for you in some ways. Was there a moment where you felt that this is actually my calling, or this is my purpose, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I, Again, yes and no. There are certain things in families, your family, my family. We see our parents growing up in a certain, profession, and we look up to our parents. We think this is what we want to do. And maybe that's why I was working a lot in social sector by myself, because my father always told me, find your purpose, work on it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be only politics, but understand politics, because that policy will make impact on your lives. So how those policies are shaping up is very important. But from that, I don't think inheritance kuch nahi hota. It's very materialistic things. You can only inherit good quality from your parents and from your family. And I think I am trying to inherit that and still continue with that. Was it in politics or anywhere else? What I inherited from my father and my mother to be, again, on purpose, conviction, and have some kind of compassion. In politics, you need it more. I think that's very, very important. Maybe not in business world, but compassion is required in politics. That's what our human quotient we work on. So I think maybe that is my inheritance, then calling it politics as my inheritance, I wouldn't like it to be
Right.
that.
Yes, of course. I think that's such a beautiful way to put it as well. Because any political leader has to truly empathize with millions of humans, right? If not billions in this case. But, is that the single most trait in terms of becoming a successful politician, in your opinion?
Oh no, everything together. You need a mix of everything. Um, Human quotient, because I call it, tell my friends who are working in HR, I said, आपका काम ज़्यादा मैं करती हूँ. Because it's human resource. You're getting right people working for you, connecting with karyakartas, building that bridge from your party workers to people. And with that bridge, trying to understand, listen, adapt. You, as a leader, I mean, any which profession you are in, but in politics, with empathy, you have to have a lot of adaptability because things are changing drastically. And I always believe change is constant. And you need to adapt and work on yourself also constantly. Um, and India as a vibrant democracy and so many people and so many problems and so many expectations, you need to understand how do you put it in right boxes and work towards it, how a policy can impact on a larger basis. So there are a lot of mix, and how do you communicate? For a politician or for a leader, communication is the biggest key. First of all, learning and listening to them, reaching out to that person. यहाँ बैठ के social media we can connect with people. But again, that human quotient, human touch is so important, so vital. That empathy, that compassion, and then understand where we can convert into a policy which is a public related policy. And I must tell you, when I contested my 2014, my line was, I'm doing PPP work. So everybody used to ask me, what is this PPP combination you're talking about? Is it something related to Poonam, P for Poonam? I said, no. Public politician partnership. Till the time that partnership does not come together, this project is not going to work as India, the global leader project. So everywhere I worked on this public politician partnership, and that partnership, any leader establishes with, again, I'm saying empathy, compassion, understanding, listening, adaptability, then that the real leader, you know, is born. And then I wouldn't call it as a leader. Then, of course, as a leader, you have to create another leaders, because that's the inheritance you have to leave for your country. At the end, we all want our nation to do well. So that's how I think I look at as politicians. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
lot of understanding, but now that's the responsibility people have given you. You must do it. So I take it as my responsibility.
Here, I would love to ask you about the 2014 elections that you just touched upon, because that was truly a breakthrough for BJP, right? It had never had the seat in Mumbai till then and never had a woman leading it. And that was a major breakthrough moment. How did you feel in that moment? And what were some of the biggest learnings for you from that campaign?
Oh, 2014 campaign was quite interesting. The seat which nobody wanted to contest, very few people were ready to contest because it was called as a Congress Gad and the bastion of Congress, and nobody could break it. Maybe I had that again conviction to fight, and I requested my party, if would you like me to contest? And this, there are some concerned elders in the party said, beta, it's very difficult. Your career has just started. Why do you want to start with a defeat? Because I was defeated in 2009 in an election, which was a very difficult seat. I said, no, I'm ready. I understand. See, again, for a politics, you have to understand public emotion at that time, mathematics of electioneering and voting pattern, and you mix and match everything. And somehow I believe that the way the euphoria for the Prime Minister, the country was showing, I knew people wanted change under his leadership. And 2014, I looked at that constituency. I said, when they look at the Prime Minister at that time, Modi ji, for that change, I might be one of the young person who can contribute in that. And I just took it as a challenge. And it was a wonderful election. That election gave me this constituency. Mumbai North Central gave me a big stage. I just not being my father's daughter, but being their member of parliament, and I had amazing experiences. And I used a lot of, again, young people, women, different quotient, how to do a different kind of marketing. Let me put it very crudely, marketing. How do you market your product? So how do you discuss? So 2014 was an interesting election, and it was a historic win by the grace of people who voted my party. And then we continued that in 2019 also, differently. But I have a lot of experiences at that election, which I used new experiences, new type of concepts, like how my father used to do it. So that made an impact. That human connection made an impact. And I'm really, when I look back 10 years ago, that Poonam and this Poonam, there's a little bit of growth and more, looking forward to it.
I think more than little bit of a growth. But when you think about well-meaning elders, right? Because I think we all have those well-meaning elders who always want to look out for you and want to protect you in so many ways. But sometimes that is also restricting one's growth, or because they might not fully see that you are able to live up to your potential in different ways if given a chance, right? And I guess what you're referring to is the conviction that you were able to find in yourself. What enables that? I'm very curious to understand, where do you get this conviction from and courage?
I don't want to say "maa ke peet se seekh ke aaye." It sounds really, maybe that can be a dialogue for a
Well, it
political
can
rally.
be, yes.
But yeah, I mean, your DNA. Let me put it more in a very sophisticated manner. Maybe the DNA and the conviction, seeing your parents. See, my father came from a small village in Marathwada region of Maharashtra. When his father didn't want him to work for the RSS, because at that time he wanted him. My grandfather was a teacher. He said, "Beta pad lo and do engineering." My father said, "No, I want to do journalism, work for the nation." So my father ran away from that house. And imagine the conviction of that man from Marathwada, where the train also just reached. He didn't run to Mumbai. Everybody would like to run to Mumbai. He ran to Delhi. And he stayed in Rakabganj Gurudwara for 2-3 days, saw Delhi. And that time he had conviction, a 18-year-old Pramod Mahajan from Ambezogai village. Ambezogai, now it's a small town in Marathwada. Seeing that I'm going to be in Delhi one day, be a member of parliament and be a decision maker when this nation building, I'll be also part of it. Oh, I think when I listen to these stories, conviction apne aap, I think it just comes out of you. So maybe looking at my father, my mother, she gave up her job, everything, because though at that time party was small. So 2-bedroom house in Chembur, where there must be 50 people every day coming, going, chai, coffee, ye karo, wo karo. So my mother was always engaging with people, those karyakartas, their families. So I think conviction, I saw it in the family. And then maybe whatever I did, it was always applauded and supported by my parents. And there was no bhedbhav that a girl can't do this or girl can't do this. Maybe that's why the conviction was pretty strong in me. And experiences are not amazing every time. Of course, I made a lot of mistakes in my life. But again, elders come in, where they tell you, if it's wrong, no problem. We are there with you and take it forward. So that's why, as my Gen Z son's language and Gen Alpha daughter's language, the boomers were very helpful to Generation X and millennials. I don't know how it converts to that way. But I believe we need all kinds together. I mean, elders' experience and our conviction. There is always somewhere friction arises.
Yeah.
But we should be smarter enough who are younger people that how do we maneuver through it? And I'm still doing it.
Yeah, it's all about finding your inner light at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And there's so much to be said about fighting against all odds, which you clearly did in that election. What were some of the on-ground learnings that you felt that really stayed with you, that you learned new things about the Indian economy, or how, the things were on the ground then?
See, it's all about consistency. And again, I'll use the word to be adaptable. One, when I have my purpose, what I have to do, I was clear about it. On election time, it is not about those 30-40 days of election and campaigning and how do you market a certain way. It's about your day-to-day connect with people. The earlier policies, what impacts it has made on people, though it's from economically to socially, how we talk about, we take these policies forward, and how do we tweak everything. Sometimes there are wonderful policies which have been placed, but it does not reach to the last person of the society. So how do you become the enabler of that policy? What I did, and I must tell you in coming to when we discuss about social sector and all, but when you talk about politics, you need to have that social understanding of every region. People always say we are divided into caste, religion, language, certain ways, then class. Of course we are. I mean, every country is like that. But how do you cater to everyone to feel included in one big policy, one big thought? That is very important to us. And in my election, I knew how to cater to young women, women who are married, women who are in their 40s. So everybody's expectation from a leader is different. Now, in men, younger men, I do not consider younger men and women separately, but I'm just trying to explain it to you how it works. Men with looking at a woman leader, how do they look at you in that manner? Do they look at you that she can do everything for us? Oh, nahi to aurat hai, emotional hai. There are a lot of aspects to that. So first you have to understand what you're catering to. You're not catering to janta. That is just a nominal answer to every question. In that janta also, you have to pinpoint everything, categorize it, reach out to those people and work towards it. Then that becomes categorization, reaching out to that every important pressing point. Then everything comes together as a society and then that janta. So you have to go detailed, working towards it. And lots of my colleagues do it in the same way. But I learned that in my 2014 election. And then, sometimes you think you don't learn anything when you were younger. You just see your parents working. Then I look back and I'll see, oh yes, I remember that Rajasthan election. Baba was doing this. His interns were working on this. He does this. Saphology was a new word at that time when he started working on it. So a new way of elections. So maybe that also came back to me with my experience and I worked. So it's just all about how do you plan your work and how do you take your past experiences, new experiences, and somewhere, collaborate to that. It's all about collaboration with people, with thoughts, with policies. So I think that's what I tried to do and we are still doing it.
Yes, so much power to you on this because, to truly be able to, in the business world, one would call it identify your target audience and, understand their problems deeply and go and solve for it, right? That's what we tell founders, entrepreneurs. But I think, one wouldn't think of politicians also thinking like that. But I guess there's so many similarities, right? Because investors are pretty much making capital allocation decisions, but politicians are making allocations of trust and resources, and that too for so many people. So to be able to do that, do you think there is some similarity there?
Yes and no again. There are few similarities, but when a business house or business leaders put in their capital, they really work towards that gain in a certain way. We have a spectrum of working a lot of things. It's not only trust. Sometimes people do trust us, and in some elections we don't see that kind of victory which we should have. Then we realize we did not enable a certain pressing point which we should have because there are n numbers of pressing points we are working on. You never know. I mean, that's a little bit of a gamble sometimes. But people of India, voters are so smart. They also know whom they want to enable. So it's very different, the relation between public, your audience, your constituents, or as market leaders call them, their, people which they want to cater to. But every business leader is catering a certain kind of market.
Yeah.
We don't have a certain kind. We have all kinds.
Yes.
So we have to have, that's why I said in the earlier answer, the categorization of that. A certain business leader, a certain business idea is catering to a certain kind of audience. We are not going to certain kind of audience. We have all kinds. As I said, the janta, then you have to enable in certain points of that audience and work towards it. So yes and no. So we need to enable and do it more. And again, a business leader doesn't have to keep their phone on 24/7. We do.
I'm sure you deal.
If you're not available, that's a pressing point. So humans' emotion, you cannot question. For a politician, why that person is feeling this way, you cannot question that. A business leader can. So there are few similarities we should work on, because I think new young age politician should take politics very professionally. चलता रहेगा नहीं, करना है तो ऐसे ऐसे करना है. So that we should learn from business leaders. So we have to learn from each other, collaborate in certain manners. But no, we don't have a certain target. We have the audiences.
You have to
quite
cater to everyone,
Yes.
and solve is public at large.
Yes.
But going back to what you said about being seen as a woman leader, I hate talking about this honestly, as most women leaders do, because you don't want to be singled out just as a woman leader. You want to be seen as a leader or a politician in your case. But always there is a perception that people might have of you. That you're too emotional, too things like that, and all the things in perceptions that women leaders are faced with, right? And which not might not be true, but that becomes public perception for some reason. So how do you work on that? Because catering to, and obviously you find your target segment in the sense that you are able to relate to women, like you said, you were able to get through to them much better. But how do you figure that out, the messaging of it?
So I spoke about this in Parliament. Let me tell you this story. It's a real story. When I was in 6th or 7th grade, I have done all my studies in a Marathi medium school. My education, even math, we used to write in Marathi numbers. So English is my third language. I learned English when I was 16, 17. I started learning properly since I was 16, 17. And that confidence was very difficult to gain and learn. Why I'm telling you this? So my father was very strict that you have to learn in your Matrubhasha, then you can learn any other languages. Which was, that time I did not like my father saying this, because in a locality where I was staying, there were all good convent going friends, and me, this girl with blue skirt and red ribbon in my hair. Um, it used to make me feel little somewhere different than these people, not in a good way. But I was, again, conviction was there and I was quite strong. One day I still remember, when you talk about women leadership and how strong a woman is, only someone at home can tell you. It's all about how you're raised. I went to my father when I was in 6th, 7th grade and I said, Baba, English is a very difficult language. And they start teaching you in Marathi medium English from 5th, 6th grade. And it is very simple English. Sita came here, Gopal sat there. Certain ways they're teaching you sentence by sentence. So I asked my father, Baba, what do you mean by he and what do you mean by she? He said, Beta, he is a man, Purush. She is a woman, Mahila. In Marathi, he was telling me. I said, Baba, why it's H-E, he, and then S-H-E, she? At that time, he just smiled and he said, Beta, you'll understand later, but let me tell you, H-E, he is a man, Purush, but superior to he is S. She is a woman. Now, for a 6th, 7th year standard girl, didn't understand that. But he put that little bead in my head that I'm superior to he. And who's telling me? He is telling me that I'm superior to him. Once that raising, that childhood strength is given to you, then at least in your mind, you know you're strong enough. Of course, then you face the world and you understand it's very difficult to be superior to he. And we all see that, because this understanding of patriarchal ideas, mansplaining, everything just hit you when you're in public and working towards it. But thankfully, what my father always told me about being superior to he stuck to me. And that really, really helped me. But again, it helped me internally. But someone was there outside trying to break me internally and externally also, trying to tell me that, oh, Poonam is, because Poonam is straightforward. A woman, when she's straightforward, she's absolutely arrogant.
And
When she knows, yes. When she knows everything, that means she's being extremely arrogant. And in once my son sent me, in a Gen Z manner, like my father told me about he and she, my son told me, he sent me an interview of Taylor Swift, where she explained it pretty well, that when a woman is precise in her conversation, she's emotional and reactionary. She reacts. A man acts and a woman reacts. I mean, where she was explaining that with points, I realized That's with every gender, every generation, and every time. I mean, every woman is facing that. So when I see that, I again remember I am superior to he. I don't. Someone in an interview told me about how do you feel baking the glass ceiling. I said मुझे पता ही नहीं था ceiling था, मैं तो आसमान देख रही थी. So this is how you have to. I tell my daughter also. I have a daughter. I always tell her. She doesn't know actually this gender bias because at home she's not seen it.
Yes.
Though men in the house have to decide how that woman has to be strong. Though it is my son, my husband, my brother, my friends, they don't make me feel that way. So that's why I don't make anyone feel that way. So somewhere it has to start. They will try to break you. You have to know that you're superior to he. And that's what I always
This is
tell
perfect
everyone.
messaging for Navratri as well, right? In your red avatar, you're literally telling the women of India
Yes.
that she is superior to he.
Yes.
I think if any messaging people remember from this podcast, I want it to be this. But, going deeper into the issues that you wanted to support, you did so much in terms of, supporting entrepreneurs, the youth, and also women. What are some of the things that are closest to your heart in your journey so far?
Many.
I'm
I
sure.
mean, this will be too long, but let me just brief it down. When I started heading the youth wing of BJP, not many women head it because, after 30, every woman becomes a Mahila and every Purush remains a Purush and Yuva. When you talk about Yuva, a 40-year-old man is still a young man, but a 40-year-old woman becomes a little bit outdated in that idea. Sometimes people look at it because she becomes a Mahila. She's married, she's looking after her children. But luckily, in my party, I'm, grateful to my leadership, Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji. Amit Bhai was that time my president. He made me youth wing president for 4 years. We have a term for 3 years, but I got one extra year. And in those 4 years, I just got khuli choot. I mean, it was the freedom I got to create young leaders, choose. And interestingly, in Youth Wing, I did not pick every leader in my Youth Wings team, which is the largest youth wing in the world, not only from a ideology which is connected to us, but someone who likes my ideology, is not politically connected, but I got them in with me, helping me, maybe interning for certain ideas, maybe doing something else. So we created Youth Wing not as only a political organization, but nation building, socially connected. You talk about ESGs like environment, social governance, everything that connected organization I created. Again, I got a lot of young women. I did not let them go to Mahila Morcha, but I told them, okay, fine, you can go there, but please help me. So I had a lot of young girls supporting me. So the youth wing was quite vibrant and I enjoyed, I'm so grateful, I enjoyed that time. Now those leaders, some of them are ministers, MLAs, MPs, local leaders. And that's the journey started. But beyond politics, my memory is in my 2014 election, I must give you an example. A 14-year-old boy came up to me, said, I want to intern with you. And that time internship was not, it was a new thing. And a young boy coming up to someone telling that I want to politically intern with you was quite surprising. He came to me, his name is Arsh Mogre, now he's working in finance. So he said, I want to work with me. I said, would you like to have some purpose in your life? Again, I asked about purpose. He said, you tell me. Prime Minister Modi, after the election, he said, Prime Minister Modi is holding a jhadu and talking about Swachh Bharat. Can I do something about it? I said, well, that's a fabulous thing because our civic sense as Indians has to be questioned and, maybe find a better answer for people to work towards it. He started a small organization called Swachhalay. And it did not remain Swachhalay. We work in community toilets, tell people how to keep your toilets clean, stay clean, why it's so important for you to be healthy. From that small constituency, one Lok Sabha, Swachhalay had a lot of chapters all over India. And that Swachhalay reached to the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister met all that young leadership and supported them.
Wow.
So it's outside politics, but connected to policy. If you remember in 2016, we had a huge concert in Mumbai BKC called Global Citizen India.
Yes, of course.
First ever. So it was just, I was lucky enough to be part of it, and I just pulled them to Mumbai and led that concert. In that concert, what was the concert all about? The Prime Minister spoke at that concert. This concert happens every year when the UNGA happens in New York. And they wanted to enter in India through Global Poverty Project. And the Prime Minister also supported them at that time. The concept is popular culture connected to United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Yeah. So you reach out to those young organizations and youngsters, tell them do something nice for gender equality, environment, education, water sanitation. Then we'll give you free tickets where who was performing? Jay-Z, A.R. Rahman, Demi Lovato, and Shankar Mahadevan, and most important, Coldplay.
Yeah.
So that was the first time Coldplay, Chris
Yeah, I don't want to say it because I remember that being such an iconic
I'm
event.
playing cricket with Chris and Sachin Tendulkar in a small school which I had adopted in constituency in Kurla. I still see those photos and I feel that we made those leaders connect with these leaders. So I think it's beyond politics. I think I have so many of these experiences when I work in animal welfare, wildlife. When I was heading Elephant Family, the Honorable King Charles had come because it's the organization by them which supports the elephant brutality, and especially they were working to make more elephant corridors in India. I was fortunate enough to become the parade ambassador for that. So wildlife, you need to create leaders everywhere. And when you have that purpose and opportunity, I don't want to lose even a single minute. And so there are so many experiences like that. I briefed it down that through Yuva Morcha, what I could do. And through all these social enterprises, I was fortunate enough to get those opportunities, and I made sure that those opportunities don't go waste.
I would love to ask you here because I've read that, you always try to enable people because you believe that a leader shouldn't just gather followers, but also enable other leaders, right? What goes into the making of enabling other people? Because, not a lot of people do that. A lot of people are sort of self-centered. They're not able to step outside their own shadow and, enable other people. So how does one inculcate that?
You have to have in you, first of all, a stability inside you. Because what drives you is very important. Insecurity drives you more in life. And which is not wrong. Every human being is in this race of, going forward, doing better for themselves, which is not wrong. But sometimes that insecurity just overpowers your ability to enable better things. So I think somewhere I try to control that. It's not like that I'm not insecure. I'm also a human being. Sometimes I feel I deserve better. Sometimes I feel I could have done this better than that person. Of course, we are in a competitive world. But beyond that, again, I'm saying the DNA works that way. Beyond insecurities, looking inward at yourself, whatever you look at it for leaders, you have to have a purpose. I'm sorry, I come down to that same word. If you have purpose to create leaders, if you have purpose to contribution, if you have purpose, you have certain time in this world to give something, do better, and go. When you're clear about it, you're less insecure about yourself. And you can control that. And for me, I have seen since childhood my father creating young leaders who are now big leaders in BJP. And that only enabled him to become much better person, and people still remember him. So is it good or bad? It's amazing. So that I learned, I saw. And when you enable you leaders, you are assured of future of your nation also. So that is what the inheritance I work on, enabling people. And maybe I learned that. It's not like that I'm performing it fully. The impact is not full. But if someone comes with an idea, I say, chalo karte hain. Even in youth wing, I say, galti karna, meri zimmedari. Acha karoge, tumhari zimmedari. Mane, you become the hero of your best thing. If something is wrong, it's mine. I'm your leader, I'll take care of it. And it's happened many times. I did get a lot of scolding in certain times where young leaders, they make mistakes. But I took it on me. I said, it's my fault and I'll take it on me. But when they are doing something amazing with their leadership, I rejoice it. I think that makes me more as a better person also. And it gives me a better 6 hours sleep at night non-stop.
6 hours and not 8 hours.
Um, let's work on. I mean, then somewhere in between Mumbai traffic, I try to take those 2 hours in between.
Yes, but here what you said is so interesting. Because people will always have this perception that politicians or even leaders, for that matter, are very disengaged from emotions, or they don't feel insecure, like you just said. Were there any moments of doubt that you had about your journey where you felt that you should probably pull back or not be in this journey altogether?
I wouldn't give you a political answer. I'll say yes.
I want an authentic and vulnerable answer.
Yes, Poonam Mahajan answer.
Hmm.
Won't be saying it as vulnerable, but very authentic answer. Yes. Every evening, I feel it. Before just stepping into the studio, I was replying to my daughter. She's in school and asking 500 things. I need this. My paper has not reached. I mean, you as a woman, as a leader, you're doing 100 different things. There's something always going on in your mind. And when you're a performer, it's very difficult to live in that brain because every day you want to make the best out of it. And when it becomes little difficult, it goes southwards. Then you don't know what to do. So by evening, I do feel being a woman, being a mother, being in all relations, being a daughter, being a public person, connected to everyone, ki nahi bhai, it's too tough. And but again, that purpose and conviction, subah utke, I'm fresh with smell of my cup of coffee, my workout, and back in business. That purpose drives me. But yes, it tires you by evening.
Yes, I can completely empathize. Being a mom myself, I
Yeah.
think the exhaustion that you feel, and especially, if you're a high achiever, kind of go-getter personality, type A personality who wants to work performer, exactly. So then, you're running on all cylinders all the time, and sometimes you just crash. So
I get it, sister.
segueing now into your social issues that you've tried to address, I would love to talk about what were some of the on ground realities that you discovered or sort of became acquainted with again, because women's representation in the parliament is still sub 15%, and there are so many issues that we need to fix, both for women entrepreneurs as well as enabling the youth in different ways, right? So were there any things that stood out to you which made you connect even deeper to your purpose?
So 33% reservation when I was lucky enough to be part of passing that resolution and that bill. But interestingly, when people talk about this reservation, women, leadership, only one thing I could tell before the bill was passed to my business leader friends that we as parliamentarians are paid equally. There are a lot of problems in equal pay in business houses for women and men. Sometimes I've heard, quite difficult to equate that payment way, but we all are paid equally, male parliamentarian or a female parliamentarian. But beyond that, that's the only equality we see. But beyond that, let me give you my experience. When people talk about 33% reservation, how will it impact, as you have asked me, and many other people ask me the same question? What do you think? How much can it help us? I say yes, maybe no. Yes, we needed this. We were too late. It will become maybe a no in between where, the problem with women leadership is, let me explain it. There is so many opportunity in politics and so many men. And there is so many opportunities in politics for women and there's so many talented women. So what I'm trying to say, the opportunity for women and men are different. As a woman, though you're superbly talented, hardworking, you can also do 24/7. Not other man can do it, but you can't do it. Though you're a mother, you're available, you're regimental, you're doing everything. But the doors don't open for you, and that door is not there. It's a small khidki, that window. In that window, as I've said, the world is this big for politics for men, and so many men who are talented to be in politics. But again, suddenly that opportunity closes down for women. But those talented women are so many. It's equal. So that to break through We needed a proper policy for that. Of course, policy right now, our Honorable Prime Minister since 2014, his policies are driven by women. Finance Minister is a woman. I mean, he thought about his driving engine of his economy will be empowering women. So that thought process, that philosophy is already sliding in, and we are working towards policies, impacting those policies. But when it comes to political leaders, few women in parliament. I sometimes used to joke, thankfully, all leaders were lovely to me, but I used to joke to my parliamentary affairs minister many years ago. So, why do you make all women sit together at one flock in parliament just to show the number? It's not right. He said, no, we are trying to show these many can make so much of impact. Imagine if there'll be 30, 40, 50% women coming in. So that struck me. But again, making an impact is very important. Passing a bill is very important. In coming times, at 33% reservation, even at that time, that reservation is not for a family member of a certain person. That reservation, of course, there'll be some people who are performing better from political families. But that reservation is for a woman who never got that chance just because she was a woman. So we have to see that. I am not saying that, I always believe every step we take is always towards progress. Because we are going on a right path. This government is going on a right path for past 11 years. So when the Prime Minister, the leader of the government, is enabling women in policies, in politics and everything, in social sector, then we understand this 33% reservation also will make an impact. But I won't say in this it's leapfrog. I mean, India is a leapfrog country, I say, when policies, when business, investments. But for women leadership, I think the responsibility more comes on women leadership to create those women leaders than male-dominated, leadership from men's. So we need to work on it. But yes, no, maybe. This is what I look at it. But I hope it is 100% yes in coming few years.
Yes, I think the more women leaders that people see and the masses see, the more enabled people will feel, right?
But we are a country where, there are a lot of Western nations now, they have female prime minister, president, chief ministers. We have seen that all. So, माँ दुर्गा देखते हैं ना भाई नाव में, so वो शक्ति देखता है.
Yes, absolutely. And, I wanted to even ask you about the demographic dividend because, everyone talks about how that is the biggest thing that India has in its favor in terms of a structural growth story, whereas the other economies are not well positioned in this regard. So, how do we stop our demographic dividend from becoming a demographic liability? Are there any
Disaster,
Yes.
you mean?
No, there are things that the Indian youth can also, impact the economy in a big way, right? Do you see some risks derailing us from that potential opportunity?
No. Why? Because I come from a thought of the leader. I've learned from him for so many years. See, again, you categorize when you even work on policies for economy. The youth is strength of this country. India in coming times by 2047 to 2050, when we'll be 103-year-old democracy. I won't call it country, but democratic country for 102, 103 years old. You will be a silver economy. And India is lucky enough to have a very young, vibrant population. As you've said, demographically dividend should not turn into a demographical disaster or a liability. I'm just making DD connected to all. But I don't see that for a reason, but it is up to that youth also to decide. This generation, which I connect to, again, I'm adaptable, I chat a lot with them. I can look at them as better generation than us and sometimes a little liability when you look at it, little different generation than us. They have better ideas than us. They have better way to approach than us. And luckily, they have amazing tools to support that. We did not have those tools. But now, how do governments step in with that? We understood since 2014, and we understood even when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, the first, I'm taking it to technology very importantly, the first Information Technology Minister, Pramod Mahajan, first ever for India, we placed our bill and created a Information Technology Act. From 2000, the Information Technology Act, and now 2025, where technology actually has reached to our kitchen. घर के चूल्हे तक टेक्नोलॉजी पहुंच चुकी है. At that time, a woman, a youth, how do we work with them is very important. So especially with the young generation, upskilling. Skill development has been a very forefront, government has been on forefront and creating policies for youth to make them believe that whatever they want to do, we can do it for them. फिर वो, we created this bridge that, youth of India, how it is demographically dividend. We have youth from rural, semi-rural, urban, semi-urban area. So these 4 areas. And then connecting those bridges that even a rural young boy can use technology and reach to an urban center and do something, or a urban youth doing something for farmers in rural area. So connecting those things and creating those bridges. So upskilling is very important. And either that can be using technology can be a disaster or can be an opportunity. It depends on government and its policies. And I'm rest assured that the kind of policies we are putting in, every time we are trying to show the Indian youth that you are the aspiration for India. Every young youth, young Indian's aspiration is India's aspiration. Unka sapna Bharat ka sapna hai. And then that connects, we become global leaders. And I always meet every youngster, tell them, you're not an Indian citizen. Now you're a global citizen. It is your responsibility the way the new global order has come. India is a global leader and you're making an impact, make India as a global leader. So their dreams and India's dreams have to align together. And that's how policies have been made. So upskilling, finding jobs, just not depend on technology, AI, beyond that. So we have to make compartment for upskilling. And I think we are doing it pretty good and we have to do it more towards the youth. So they will not be a demographically liability. It's our responsibility. They will be the strength and be the global citizen for India being a global leader.
I love that. And, I'm sure there are lots of youth, there are lots of young people who look up to you for advice. And, you have a son who's almost 21.
Kids at home look at mother, they love me. But I think a lot of answers I give, I hope they don't say it's lame, mom. I don't know what you're saying. So those two, so I call my son, you're my constituent now, you're my voter. But I don't cater to his ideas because it's too demanding as a mother.
But I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to someone in their 20s who's navigating this world of, deciding what career path to pursue? Like you said, there's a change in global world order.
Yes.
How does the Indian youth position themselves today, in your opinion?
First, find your purpose. Very important for Indian youth because India is prepared and India is going forward. How do you find your purpose with the nation's dream, with your dream? Second, that conviction. The youth now has a very great tool called technology. How do you use technology to enhance yourself? How do you use those government policies to enhance yourself? Once you're ready, you can do it better. But most importantly, your mental health. The youth of today, sometimes, like my generation, if I have to go from A to D, I know I have to take a point A to B, B to C, C to D. They want to fly to D, which is a fabulous thing because they have those tools. But when they are taking off from A, somewhere they navigate somewhere else because of their mental pressure, mental health phenomena which has come up, where they do not know what to do. So I try to meet all these youngsters and I understand there's so much pressure for them. So understanding technology, upskilling, your purpose in life, conviction, and especially your mental health. So how do you combine all that together and find your calling is very important. Because either this way or that way is the only idea we're looking at. But somewhere, even in political, my friends, when I talk to my colleagues, we are always either black and white in talking. We have to find a midway. We're somewhere in the center, finding our midway. That's why we're going forward. Why India is so loved, supported, aligned with everyone in the world. Because we have found our center. We are not, bending towards any which way. We are going straight with blinkers on and we just want to go forward. So the youth has to decide its purpose, conviction, upskilling, technology, and mental health. It's very important. Once that we get it together, oh God, they'll surely fly only. And they are flying. Who's making the unicorns? Gen Z. Who are creating amazing content now? Gen Z. Who are making India prouder? Gen Z. So these coming new generation youth know what they want to do, but they just deviate because of certain way. Even they use technology, it goes too far. How much to limit even a phone time, technology time has to be worked on because it is impacting your mental health. When it's impacting your mental health, it's impacting your performance. When it's impacting your performance, again, you're going spiral down with your mental health. So all these things holistically we have to look at. And I think the youth of this nation, again, I'm saying on a right track, finding that center line to take off.
Why is mental health such an important part of this conversation?
I think now mental health is important in this conversation because of the competitive nature. We see it. The youth of today's generation is more open to their emotions. I think my generation or your generation, sometimes we used to let go and hold on to our emotions we did not know where to express. This generation expresses it. Sometimes it becomes, as demographically dividend you call, about a liability, but sometimes it's very important to be vulnerable and open about it. But how much to open and be strong about is also very important. And when I have conversation with the generation Gen Z, I see somewhere that is impacting them. So I always tell them, don't call it my mental health. Just see my mental well-being. Let's change the word, from negative to positive. So let's remove the negative list and put the positive list that my mental health is my mental well-being. Yes, there are a lot of pressures. Technology is putting a lot of pressure on me. One phone puts a lot of pressure. Cyberbullying, you want to do perfect, you want to look perfect. There's so many, aspects which are affecting your mental health. So how do you make mental health into mental well-being? Once you're mentally stronger, better. You're expressive, but how much expression to put forward? How much, even being vulnerable has to have some kind of limits. So with that, there again, I'm saying this generation has amazing ideas, amazing creators. That combination, collaboration has to happen. That's why I'm saying mental health is also important. We don't want them to deviate.
Absolutely. I think, you are so attuned to how people really feel on the ground. I can clearly see the compassion and empathy shining through. But here, I would also like to now change the conversation into, say, India's role in the changing world order, right? There is so much geopolitical tension across the world, and the US seems to be losing its dominance in some ways, where, we are still navigating what the relationship will look like, even though it's been a tremendous ally to India so far, but we don't know where we stand geopolitically now. What do you think? How is the global world order changing according to you? And how should India find its positioning today?
I think as you've asked, where do we stand? We stand in the center. When you talk about three global powers, importantly, because the conversation is going there, China, America, and India. And how do we stand in the middle? With CH, if there is no IN, the A cannot be completed. So there's always IN in between C and A.
Brilliant.
Between China and America, there is India. Without that IN, nothing's going to get completed. And we are right in the center. So though we are right in the center of chaos or questions, but we are right in the center to hold on to these global powers and meet friends, help each other to create this global new world order. So that right in the center, IN, is very important for A and CH. So that's how it's completed. So that's what China, India, and America, the relationship has to have that kind of collaboration. And I think what is happening right now, we will look forward to it because for us, India matters most. India's policies matter most. Every Indian citizen living in India and outside matters the most for us. So we will be working for that. And Honorable Prime Minister's always been on the forefront of keeping every Indian citizen living in India and outside India, their policies and their dreams to forefront. He always put them in the forefront. Priorities of every Indian citizen all around the world. That's why now our passport is stronger is okay. But anywhere in India, when you talk about India, that Indian citizen is proud to be an Indian. I won't say that was not the case before, but right now it's more evident when you see when India is holding that global order and standing in the middle of everything, in the center, completing this, backbone of the economy with these two strong nations. I think we'll have more conversations on that. I'm very hopeful where China, India, and America will have more conversations, work for our youth, work for the global order. So that's why CHINA.
That's such a brilliant way to put it. I hope more people start adopting it.
I think I learned from the best. Our Prime Minister, I saw him working towards it. That's why it just struck me. I think this is the right way to put it forward.
And, because this is also with the recent news cycle about H-1B visas, I think, that definitely affects a lot of Indians who live in the US. There will be a shift in sentiment in terms of how they view the India opportunity now versus, the American dream. How do you see that shift happening over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
See, I can't comment what another country is doing in that manner. But what I can comment on is we have to see everything as an opportunity. And once we see everything as an opportunity, that chaos will give us a ladder to go up. The chaos is happening around. But if you remember, I don't know, let me give you the anecdote of Game of Thrones. So in Game of Thrones, Littlefinger says chaos is the ladder. And there's so much of chaos happening, India is holding that ladder to go up. And we should hold on to it, that ladder. So I think reverse brain drain also can be an opportunity. We will work more on our policies, more accepting on our policies, and that's what India wants. I think that will be again an opportunity, of course, but still, country will have conversations. There are already bipartisan meetings are happening, conversations are happening, but India is prepared for everything. As our Prime Minister said, we are prepared for everything. Maybe sometimes we have to hold on to that brace position. As a pilot, I can tell you. But I see a smoother landing. I mean, I don't see that difficulty. But we have to go through that. When there is a chaos, we have to hold on to a ladder.
You have to sit through the turbulence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kursi ki peti maan ke rakhiye. We will be slave because we have a great leader who is institutionally, it's not a person-based policy. It's more of an institutional-based policy. So, and that policy is for next 100 years. And we will be seeing that fruit coming out of every policies. And whatever happens in the world, Indian citizen is safe, supported, and we will work towards it. Because now that Indian citizen is a global citizen. See, again, any Indian citizen suffering through that turmoil time, we will call it, we welcome them, they are our citizens, but it is someone else's loss because having Indian brain is always the strength of every economy. So we know that what we are capable of.
Of course, most of the tech leaders who are leading the global giants are actually Indian CEOs.
But I'm saying we know what we are capable of. So who's loss and who's gain? The world knows.
Yes, and we'll see that shaping up over the next few years.
I mean, we are prepared for anything, but see, again, the leadership is stronger. The country goes through that turmoil in a much better, precise way. But I don't see a turmoil. I just see chaos somewhere happening around. And India's holding that ladder, as I've said with that anecdote.
Yes. Over the last few days, I've had a lot of conversations with my friends who were based out of the US. And, everyone's talking about, obviously, India has changed now radically. Where, GST reforms, Startup India, Semicon mission, there's so much happening. So everyone in the US and globally is also very curious about, what's actually happening in India. How is India supporting innovation? In your lens, what do you think politically we got right in terms of reforms to have enabled this level of innovation?
See, India is a unique nation. We have a culture and strength of thousands of years story to tell about India. It survived so much. And the strong democratic India, where we have all religions together, caste, creed, everything, and we still survive with a very strong democracy, vibrantly. Again, now the youth of this nation, which is our superpower to be the global leader. Um, India, as being unique, first time, sometimes there was a combination. People used to make it as a welfare state. Then we opened up the economy. Again, we went back to be a welfare state. There was a lot of confusion with these ideas because not every Indian um, cater to the same dream, which we all do. Because everybody's class and certain way of lifestyles, we see it. We also have poverty. We have to see that also, empowering, enabling those people also. So this is the first time the philosophy of welfare state to wealth creation, it just collaborated pretty well. So not leaving any stone unturned. And I think that collaboration created these not incremental change, but the transformation. With every transformation through GST, through infrastructure, through every policy, we just transformed India's idea, the philosophy of welfare with wealth creation. I mean, I think that very beautifully Honorable Prime Minister has been working on for past 10 years. And I see that growing. So I will not pinpoint what has helped us, what has not helped us. But we needed all this thing together to create a stronger state. We will have more and more investments. We will have more and more transformation policies. This is just a start, believe me. GST, of course, we are reworking on GST, and now the new reform, the Gen Next GST has come up. That GST will, of course, again increase the India's strength of spending, and we will see, which is very important for India. When you talk about infrastructure, doubling the airport, maybe tripling of, into 10 folds, we are seeing new airports. The other day, Honorable Prime Minister spoke about chip to ship, semiconductor to these big ports where we are connecting more efficiently and better. So there are so many things we worked on, these transformational change, the philosophy of welfare to wealth creation. I think that is making an impact. And we will be seeing it more to enable. See, every policy rule is only to enable people to do better. If they do better, economy does better, the country does better. So this is how enabling each other is very important. And this transformational, unique change has happened. And we will do more and more towards it. So I think it's all, in a nutshell, I'll say everything coming together has created that strong superpower.
It feels like India is having its moment finally, right?
We are, with even so much of confusion all around the world. India is standing strong, not backing down, trying our best. I think, and especially even the leadership and people I meet, they say, kuch bhi ho gaya, lekin hum to, that enthusiasm, they have it. And that is required. So enabling those people, catering them is also important. So no incremental changes. Transformation. That's what this government has been doing.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a joke that got forwarded to me from an investor group where, people are talking about how domestic capital has been able to sustain the Indian economy and the stock markets despite so much, foreign outflow of capital happening over the last year specifically. But, with these GST reforms, now people will want to go and splurge on, say, ACs and, fridges instead of,
They will decide which one they want to aim, because there is a basket of different tax benefits.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the interesting part. Even I feel it's not only Indian domestic consumption, it's how people look at it, how they live. This is very important for us. That happiness quotient people look at. So even that is also important. When you buy something, you're happy. You're buying something for your family, you're happy. So again, that mental well-being of the nation is also very important. So that domestic consumption connects to many other human aspects. I think that is also very important for us.
And what can we continue doing to keep attracting foreign capital? Because, we did have a record investment of $83 billion in FDI. And you were also looking at external affairs as a part of the committee, right? So I would love to hear your point of view on how to attract more foreign capital into the country. Because, if you think about some of the competitors that, say, are emerging in the US with OpenAI, etc., they are worth like $500 billion, $1 trillion, which is, a good size of our current economy size. How do we keep attracting good foreign capital to come and help in institution building in India?
I think it's already started because the policy is placed that way. Everything can happen with your conviction and your policy.
Hmm.
And the policy has already been laid out. A lot of incentives have been given. When you look at it, Chalo, let me put it, manufacturing sector. We are trying to empower and push the manufacturing sector, which never happened before. We are trying to go through manufacturing. Then we talk about services. We've always been doing well. That's why the investments are here. But, let me put it first about why this monumental change we are seeing and investment and we need more to attract. It's about the characteristic of a country. What is India's character? Trust and intelligence. The $500 million people living somewhere in Silicon Valley come from the Indian origin, most of them. So what I'm trying to say, our democracy is vibrant and intellectual. Our democracy is larger, which can be great for manufacturing. Our democracy is big, where there are women who are now getting empowered. That's why the society is getting better and better. Our health sector, we are trying to reform to make us more healthier and better. Our social sector, think about it first, social security was not a thing. Now through one Aadhaar and one, we call it Jandan Aadhaar mobile, Jam Trinity. Just with one phone, can your friend in America just pay with a click of phone? No. So technology is also taking, why? Policies. I mean, I don't go out with a purse in my hand now because I have one phone, which can, make me shop anywhere, connect anywhere. So technology, how India is with its policies for past 20 years and especially past 11 years, is making those changes, those transformations in policy where people are being attracted. And in that, our characteristic, India's is trust, soft power. There are so many things we are working on. I mean, I read it the other day that how India is doing well and how these investments are coming. In 2014, because I'm an aviation geek, Airbus's Connect with India's selling was only $200 million. Now the business is 1.5 billion in 2024. And we have opened the defense sector. If there is no technology we are creating, we are collaborating. Defense, they create a negative list, quite interestingly. So we are collaborating also and working on Make in India list also. How do we? So Defense Ministry always take out a list called negative list. We won't import this, we won't import this, certain way we won't import this gun, we won't import this missile. What we try to tell is that we can share technology with you and we create Make in India. So that push in defense. Space sector, again, collaboration. And we are doing much, much better. So we are opening up sectors, but not opening in such way. We are opening to collaborate. We are opening to invest. And India's trust, India's stability, very importantly, why we see so much of investment in past 10 years in India. Because a stable government with stronger policies and that transformation seeing impact on ground, then only you will see a business leader investing. I mean, you know it better than me. A business leader or anybody, if they want to invest in a country or somewhere else, they see the characteristic of the person, how that person's character is in their working mode. Second, they believe that how they're creating their leadership, impacting it, and how stability is there in that business. And after the stability, with that stability, they see the impact report, that what kind of impact they have made. All three in past 10 years under the leadership of Honorable Narendra Modi ji, I think we see that happening. That's why the investments. And we are giving those incentives to companies, younger people, HNIs and all also. You have seen they're investing now in real estate. PM Gati Shakti. is such an important policy created by the Prime Minister, where you see an greatest change in infrastructure and investments also. So there are investments, there'll be more and more in numbers. A policy has to be more adaptable, and that's what this government is doing.
Yes, it's truly fascinating to see it, because I have the lens of both private markets and public, and I get to see this innovation and get to interact with founders who are building these emerging technologies, right? And there's never been this kind of excitement, even in founders, because there's so much government support, announcing different funds in the budget itself. I think that provides a different level of empowerment to founders who are choosing to build in India.
Yeah, and how do we see it as politicians, policymakers? We see it through your lens. I watch your podcast. What do I learn? In your beautiful podcast, where people are explaining what is being done, how happy they are, and what they expect from you. Expectations only come from people who perform. And I see all these leaders on your podcast are expecting more from us because we perform. So this is very important for us also through your lens to see that what the world is saying, what our leaders are saying, what the business families here are saying. It's very important. And if that positivity is there, it gives us more, the government works more towards it. And again, I'm saying characteristic of a leader is also very important.
I love the positive energy that you have, and you're truly an optimist. But, I would love to also pick your brains on where do you see the risks and challenges lie? Where can we go wrong, or what can potentially derail the India story, in your opinion?
Um, it won't derail. Again, I'm an optimist, but very realist also. What we have to do is, whenever I meet business leaders, I always tell them, collaborate for upskilling. Collaborate for upskilling. I'm sorry I use this word very strongly because upskilling is the only answer we have. In the era of Gen AI, where you can name them any which company you're using, in that era of Gen AI, with 1.5 billion people of India, almost 1.5 billion, there is a little bit of worry that will they take our jobs? So when that kind of worry is discussed through technology and Gen AI, we also have to enable use tools and tell those youngsters that let's enhance yourself through Gen AI technology, that how you can perform better. That's point number one. Second, with youth, because I feel we won't be derailed, upskilling in post-Gen AI ideas. Now, if you see in Germany, you will see young Indian engineers supporting ideas. Now, you just saw the Prime Minister has tied up with Japan, and we have collaborated sending upskilled young nurses and young students to Japan. 500,000 is the number in coming 10 years. So, India's power is number of people, but if that power will remain powerful, we will remain powerful if we upskill them in certain sectors which is demanded by the global sector. Of course, we have it in services, we have it in technology, but tomorrow India can create a lot of nurses, medical, yoga, Ayurveda. There are so many. I was reading in Forbes report, there are many other jobs which youngsters in the world are not taking up beyond AI, beyond technology, which has the opportunity for Indians to upskill themselves for. So why not robotics, everything. We can work on so many different ways and, categorize those upskilling. I think we have that. So that collaboration with business leaders, government policies, if we work consistently on that upskilling of the youth and not get worried by this Gen AI is going to take my jobs, which they won't, because artificial intelligence, human intelligence, we understand it more and Indians do it much better. Once we come out of that worry and only discussing Gen AI, but we're not thinking jobs beyond that. A sportsman, let me put it with an example tomorrow. Now, if Surya Kumar Yadav is playing cricket, maybe an artificial intelligence can tell him in a certain degree if he makes that shot, he can get a 6. But there is something he has called his gut feeling, his heart, his experience, his brain. He will make that shot the way that he wants it because he's comfortable with that. Not a technology telling him. A technology can enhance him thinking in that manner. But that shot, he has to take it with his experience of, hitting so many thousands of shots. So that's what I'm trying to explain, that how much a technology can limit us or enhance us, but not control us. Beyond that, there are jobs. So upskilling, upskilling, upskilling. And we are doing it, and we should do more.
I think you've hit a nerve for the youth today because there is real insecurity about job losses, right? And I think there is a fantastic report that I read that, there will be a great set of jobs which won't be impacted, which, manual labor or anything to do with hands, which Indians are very skilled at. It's just about channeling your energy in that direction. And with every technological change and inflection point, there's always productivity which is enhanced, which you can use and channel lies to improve different outcomes, right? So I think it's just a change of perspective that we have to work towards when supported by wonderful policies. I think overall that enables us all as a nation.
Yes.
Poonamji, just last question on the fact of, now India will be 100 plus years old, as not as a country, but as a democracy, like you said, in 2047. What's your hope to see India as in 2047?
So there is always a discussion. People used to talk about Bharat Sone Ki Chidiya. And people did not understand Sone Ki Chidiya ka matlab kya tha. It is not only economy. India's strength will double, triple. We will be top 3 economy, global leader by 2047. I have full faith in India's youth. Policies, the leadership under Narendra Modi ji, we are doing very well. And these policies are not for next 10, 20 years. It's for generations to come. But with all that, we have another strength, that soft power of intelligence, our, belief, our culture. There is so much we have, compassion. So I want India not to be only a global leader with, the superpower of economy, being in the center as I am, but I want India to be a global leader of compassion, empathy, connect, our soft powers of our Ayurveda, our belief in yoga. I mean, there are so many things India has and to cater to the world. So I think we should be doing that. And I think I look back, even someone was asking me the other day that, Poonam, how do you leave your legacy in coming times? I said, Bhaiya, legacy kuch nahi hota. You have to do your work, because legacy is only transforming yourself and your ideas to another person. Legacy is only that much. What you want is do your work and enable people with their ideas to work on it. So I see India as a bright, beautiful, strongly democratic, young nation with young power, enabled to do much, much better. But I want to see India's that soft power to be there also, as a compassionate, empathetic, beautiful, beautiful, equal state in the world.
That's such a profound note to end the episode with. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's wonderful in terms of how you think about legacy, because, your father is so fondly remembered by so many, and I think your work will be remembered as well. And you've truly touched lives of millions. And, I think they say that, you live for as long as you are remembered. And
Absolutely.
I think that holds true in your work as well. So thank you for enabling so many Indian youth and channeling your energy into serving the economy and India.
Kind of you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for teaching me more and more through your podcast. Because all of us have to learn. Once a person stops learning, then he's not living.
I'm so glad that you watched
Yes.
the episode despite your busy and hectic schedule.
So I'm sorry, let me put it in the last note. Nobody is busy if they are not regimental with their time. You have time for everything in life, and still you can live a good life.
Absolutely, yes. More power to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's not every day that you get to sit across from your icon and ask them all the questions that you wanted answers to. And that was the day for me today. If you enjoyed watching this episode, please remember to subscribe to our channel so that you get notifications every time we drop another one.